Hello and welcome. I'm Asima Katauka and you're watching the Africa Brief on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines of this hour. UN officials have warned that South Sudan's dire humanitarian crisis could reach catastrophic levels of international support. Rains has violence and displacement surge across the country. At least 26 people were killed and more than 25 remain missing after a devastating landslide struck Elgeyo Marakwet County in Kenya's Rift Valley. Following days of heavy rain, the Kenyan Red Cross and disaster agencies are conducting rescue operations now. Turkey's defense ministry has said that 20 soldiers were killed in a crash of military aircraft in Georgia as inspectors continue to search for clues on what caused the NATO member's cargo plane to go down. The United Nations, through Humanitarian Human Rights Chief Volker Turk, has called for an independent investigation into the killings of hundreds of protesters during Tanzania's disputed elections, amid reports that security forces hid bodies to conceal evidence. The Catholic Church in Tanzania has condemned the killings of protesters in recent election-related demonstrations, urging healing and justice over violence. The killings follows the disputed October 29th election that declared President Samia Suluhu Hassan as the winner. The U.S. House of Representatives is expected to vote on Wednesday on a bill to end the 6-week government shutdown. This comes as U.S. President Donald Trump has declared victory, praising Republican leaders, while Democrats remain divided over the deal to reopen federal operations. The U.S. Supreme Court has extended a pause on a judge's order that required U.S. President Donald Trump's administration to fully fund food aid for 42 million low-income Americans amid the federal government shutdown. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro signs a sweeping defense law urging national preparedness amid rising U.S. tensions, while Colombia's President Gustavo Petro suspends intelligence sharing with U.S. security agencies criticizing U.S. missile strikes in the Caribbean. Now we start with Africa. UN officials have warned that South Sudan's dire humanitarian crisis could reach catastrophic levels of international support as violence and displacement surge across the country. UN Women Executive Director Sima Bahous has highlighted atrocities against women in the country, while UN Under-Secretary General for Peace Operations Jean-Pierre Lacroix has warned about the future of the peacekeeping mission in South Sudan. Let's listen into what the two officials have shared.
South Sudan's path to peace and development is beset by political instability, humanitarian crises, and socio-economic fragility. The country contends with weakened institutions and struggles with social cohesion, all as the ongoing war in neighboring Sudan further destabilizes its fragile transition. Since April 2023, over 1.2 million people have crossed into South Sudan, straining South Sudan's systems and capacities, complicating humanitarian delivery, and making mediation and cooperation more difficult. As always in crises and conflict, women and girls are hit hardest. Every day they face relentless climate challenges, food insecurity, sexual violence, abductions, and more. South Sudan has one of the highest rates of gender-based violence in the region, with an estimated 2.7 million people at risk. 2024 saw UNMISS document 260 cases of conflict-related sexual violence, including rape, gang rape, sexual slavery, forced abortion, and forced marriage, with the highest number recorded in Western Equatoria State.
However, this requires genuine political negotiations and compromise. In this regard, we call for the resumption of the government-led joint task force with UN, AU, IGAD, and Troika to support the prioritization and resourcing of the constitutional making and electoral processes.
Meanwhile, South Sudan's UN ambassador Cecilia Abot Majok Adeng has defended recent government reforms as legitimate, saying that they were meant to enhance efficiency, promote accountability, and ensure stability during the transition. She has also reaffirmed her government's commitment to the peace process and the permanent ceasefire. South Sudan has faced repeated bouts of violent conflict since 2011, with a civil war between 2013 and 2018, leaving 400,000 people dead. Now for this discussion, we welcome Ambassador Mahesh Sachdev. He's a former Indian ambassador, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Ambassador, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now looking at this, is there anything international community can do to balance humanitarian aid delivery with pressure on South Sudan to implement meaningful reforms? And what role can UN peacekeeping missions play in preventing further escalation?
Let's get the facts right. South Sudan seceded from Sudan more than a decade ago. And it's 7.5 million people are virtually dependent on international aid. It's one of the poorest countries of the world and in Africa. It's also been ravaged by long-standing conflict, frictions, etc., which were resolved through 2018 transition government deal, in which two warring leaders, Salva Kiir and Rachek Machar, were given president and vice president positions, and the government was supposed to run in a transitional phase till 2026, that is next year, when proper elections were to be held. These two leaders represent their respective tribes, Dinka tribe, which is the largest in the country, and Nuer tribe, which has significance, numbers. But the two almost never got along together. And latest reports indicate that President Salva Kiir has imprisoned Vice President Machar, and he's being accused to be tried for treason, murder, and other things. This has heightened tensions between their respective tribes, and that has exacerbated the otherwise tense security situation, malgovernance, and the agriculture failures that have compounded the country's fate. All these make the delivery of humanitarian goods fairly complicated exercise, partly because the country is landlocked and its previous route through Sudan has been compromised because Sudan itself is under a very intense civil war. Sudan has its own humanitarian crisis to contend with, and that has led to, as you mentioned, 1.5 million refugees, adding on to 7.5 million population of South Sudan.
Yes.
I believe that G7 foreign ministers meeting is going to talk about it when they meet in Canada later in the week. But the portents are not very bright, I'm afraid, because of the logistical issues, because the aid fatigue from the donors who have to contend with Gaza and Ukraine crisis going on right now. Thank you.
Right. Ambassador, thank you very much for shedding light on the history and geography surrounding this topic. Thank you very much. Please stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion as well. Now, staying in the region, the United Nations Humanitarian Chief Tom Fletcher has held what he called constructive talks with Sudan's army leader Abdel Fattah al-Burhan as the UN pushes to expand life-saving aid across the war-torn country of Sudan. The meeting in Port Sudan, now the government's de facto capital, comes as the conflict between Sudan's army and the rapid support forces has killed tens of thousands and displaced nearly 12 million people since April 2023. Fletcher has said that he had received assurances that UN operations could continue everywhere across Sudan on a neutral and impartial basis. Let's listen into what the Secretary General for Humanitarian Affairs, Tom Fletcher, has said.
The humanitarian crisis in Sudan remains at alarming levels. And as I expressed in the UN Security Council last week, the international community has been shocked and horrified by the atrocities carried out in el-Fasher. All of us want to see peace return to the Sudanese people, and the humanitarian community stands ready to scale up and deliver life-saving support at the levels necessary to reach tens of millions of Sudanese people with food, with medicine, and with medical support.
The talks follow reports of mass killings, famine-like conditions, and attacks in Darfur and Kordofan. Even as the RSF claims to have accepted a US-backed truce proposal, Fletcher's visit is part of a broader UN effort to secure humanitarian access and funding for millions trapped behind the battle lines. Now we welcome back Ambassador Mahesh Sachdev. He's a former Indian ambassador, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Ambassador, for staying with us. Now, in our earlier discussion, you also mentioned that this conflict in Sudan is pouring and affecting the South Sudan crisis. Now, looking at Sudan, what are the potential risks and limitations of negotiating with military leaders for neutral aid delivery in terms of a UN trying to do that, and how effective can UN humanitarian diplomacy be in this region?
One would have to be partially skeptical about the pronouncements by Tom Fisher. Behind his brave words is a fairly grievous situation. Separately, he and other UN humanitarian officials have been pleading with UN Security Council to prioritize the aid to Sudanese refugees. They have pointed out that 20 years ago, when fighting erupted in Sudan, in Sudan's Darfur area, the world was forthcoming with more assistance than is being done now, when the crisis is even bigger. They have been appealing to the consciousness of global community to come up with more aid. So his brave words that international community stands ready to scale up, etc., I think have a somber background. I should also add here that RSF and SAF have been at the loggerheads, and there's hardly any love lost between the two. While both of them talk about facilitating humanitarian access to those who are in most need, they have either been less than vigilant in securing that aid and taking it, allowing it through armed escorts, etc., to the right places, resulting in the aid being waylaid and looted and so on, because the food and other medicines and so on are needed everywhere. So people are quite desperate. And all plans to distribute it on need basis have gone awry. Between the two, I think while they have agreed to access through various points, RSF and SAF border remains pretty tense, and access to, for example, inland areas controlled by RSF through SAF is unlikely to happen. That will have to go through other neighboring countries of RSF-held area like Chad and Central African Republic and Libya, etc., who have their own problems.
Yes.
South Sudan has, as we talked earlier, cannot
Yes.
be used as a conduit for its own reasons of
Yes.
insecurity, etc. So all that told, the situation is quite grim.
Yes.
12 million people as refugees and 4.5 million people outside Sudan also as victims of this insecurity.
Yes.
Need to be supported, and that's proving to be largest humanitarian crisis in the world, while
Yes.
the aid is not proportionate. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you very much. With that, I would like to thank Ambassador Mahesh Sachdev for joining us and sharing your insight throughout our news. Thank you very much. Now, moving on, the United Nations has called for an investigation into the alleged killings of hundreds of people in the protests that erupted during last month's disrupted elections in Tanzania. The call for a probe comes as Tanzanian authorities have charged hundreds of people with treason over these demonstrations. UN Human Rights Chief Volker Turk has said that there was an apparent attempt to conceal evidence of protesters' deaths. This accusation follows reports that security forces were taking bodies of those killed in the violence from mortuaries to undisclosed locations. The main opposition party, Chadema, has stated that about 2,000 people were killed during 3 days of protests following the disputed poll. The government has yet to give an official death toll. The UN also said hundreds of people are believed to have been killed, but was unable to verify the figures due to the volatile security situation in Tanzania and the country's internet shutdown that lasted for 6 days after the elections. Now for this discussion, we welcome Ayanuga Olubenga Paul. He's a public affairs analyst, joins us live from Lagos. Thank you very much for joining us again. Good to see you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Now looking at this, what more can you tell us about the situation that's unfolded in Tanzania, or what more do we know about this?
Well, I think the Tanzanian government is trying to consolidate itself in government after quickly doing the operation to cement the new term of the president in office, and in order to ensure that all loopholes are covered. I think that's why they are doing a lot of things they are doing, but it seems that they are forgotten from history the case of the Srebrenica massacre that led to the likes of Slobodan Milosevic of the former Yugoslavia then being tried with his henchmen who were in support of him during that situation. And the Chadema party has claimed that about 2,000 people have been dead or missing since this crisis has started, even though the UN authority are being careful to quote a specific figure, but they are also saying that a lot of people have been killed and the dead bodies were not even released to their families for proper burials because they don't want people to be accounted for properly. You know, it's just like nobody, no evidence. So that's what it seems like they are trying to do. And what this will do us in the psyche of most Tanzanians who are opposed to the government is a government who took power by brute force, and they will not readily acknowledge such government. And for anybody to think that Hassan Suluhu is the only one, that president is the only one in this cabal getting this thing done, I think the person should rethink the thing, because while she might be the figurehead that we are seeing in the front, there are a lot of fingers pointing to other powerful members of the Tanzanian political community, such as former President Kikwete, even the Vice President Emmanuel Nchimbi, are all fingered in the ongoing conversation about the deadly massacre that is taking place. And, you know, even though they shut down internet for 6 days to prevent people to air their grievances and maybe bring live updates of what is happening on the ground to the people, they are now threatening those who are uploading videos from that event during the time internet was shut down. They are now uploading videos, and they are threatening those uploading the videos with treason so that they will not upload the video. And I'm sure that even when the more damning videos surface, they will most likely say it's AI or it's doctor or this or that. But I think the Tanzanian government, having taken power now, needs to look for a way to compensate the citizenry, one with good governance, then those who have lost family members with immediate release of the dead body so that they can have a closure, and also maybe a form of relief to the families who have lost breadwinners, and they should release all political prisoners who, that is the only way they can begin to make effort to pacify the people. Other than that, I don't see the trouble ending for the Tanzanian government. You might try to, you know, suppress the people temporarily using brute force, but eventually the people might raise themselves up in resistance army, and we've had one too many resistance army in most corners of Africa that it would be a terrible thing if Tanzania is now added to the list again. I think the president should learn what is happening in Mali, what is happening in Sudan and Congo, and try to mend fences as one of our major priority as she is taking power now.
Right. With that, I would like to thank Mr. Ayunaba Olugbenga Paul for joining us again as public affairs analyst and sharing that insight. Thank you very much. Now we stay in the region. In Gabon, a court has sentenced former First Lady Sylvia Bongo and her son Nuruddin Bongo to 20 years in prison for embezzlement and corruption following a 2-day graft trial held in their absence. Both were accused of diverting public funds and exploiting former President Ali Bongo, who was removed from power in a 2023 military coup. Sylvia Bongo, 62, has denied all charges, while her son, 33, has dismissed the case as a legal farce. The court says testimony from former aides revealed a system of siphoning state money for private gain. Tens of the Bongo's former associates are also on trial for complicity. The Bongo family ruled Gabon for 55 years, first under Omar Bongo and then his son Ali Bongo, before the coup led by General Brice Oligui Nguema took power. Now we move on. The World Bank and Tunisia have signed a $430 million financing deal to modernize the country's electricity sector and expand renewable energy. The 5-year agreement aims to make Tunisia's power supply more sustainable, reliable, and affordable by improving the performance of the state utility stack and accelerating renewable energy deployment. The plan targets $2.8 billion in private investment to add 2.8 gigawatts of new solar and wind capacity by 2028. According to the World Bank initiative, it will help cut electricity costs by nearly 20% and create around 30,000 jobs, strengthening Tunisia's position as a regional clean energy hub. Now we move on to Ethiopia. Ethiopia has stated that it would host the United Nations COP32 Climate Summit in 2027, fending off a rival bid from Nigeria to land an influential role that will allow it to shape the agenda and outcomes of the event. The more immediate choice of host for next year's COP31 remains unsolved. However, with both Australia and Turkey are vying for it, COP hosts countries adopt a presidency role, which allows them to set goals for the summit and showcase their own climate issues, as well as an important position in resolving any conflicts that arise during the negotiations. Now we move on to South Africa. In South Africa, former President Jacob Zuma is set to testify in defense of his daughter, Duduzile Zuma Sambula, who is on trial for incitement to violence linked to the July 2021 unrest that left over 300 people dead and devastated the economy. The Umkhonto we Sizwe Party MP faces 3 counts of incitement to commit terrorism and 2 counts of public violence. Prosecutors alleged that her social media posts that at the time encouraged riots, looting, and the destruction of property. Zuma Sambula's trial began this week in the Durban High Court and is expected to continue for 2 weeks, with her father's testimony likely to draw major public attention. And that's a wrap on Africa Brief. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.
What we can do